Thomas Brown's debut as Chicago Bears interim head coach wasn't a great first impression, but it gave him plenty of things to improve upon for his second showing against the Minnesota Vikings.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On the show today, we look at the specific areas that interim head coach Thomas Brown can do better, operating the Bears offense in his second game as head coach, as well as this Bears defense with Thomas Brown and also defensive coordinator Eric Washington in his second ever game calling plays for this defense. A lot of room for improvement, but things you can point to from the 49ers game and say, yeah, if they do this and this and this a lot better, maybe they'll have a chance to still pull off some kind of upset against the Minnesota Vikings. And we'll also talk a little bit of special teams because there's going to be some changes on that side of the ball due to injuries. And we can check in on the injury report as well and how that'll shift things in the matchup on Monday night. But I want to start with the offense, where we saw Caleb Williams and this crew have its best performance all around of the season against the Vikings just 2 weeks ago. They put up 27 points, and maybe I should say best performance against, considering the defense they were going against, right? The 27 points they put up in that game was their best output since beating up on the Jaguars and the Panthers. Like, it felt like something where the offense was really clicking in some ways. Caleb threw for over 300 yards for just the second time this season, and it just kind of felt like things were clicking against that Vikings defense in a way that we weren't necessarily expecting. But 2 weeks later, it's back to the same old Bears offense against the 49ers. They only scored 13 points and just really couldn't get anything going. So I think it's an opportunity for Thomas Brown to look in the mirror here and say, okay, what can we do differently that didn't work against the 49ers that maybe we can get back to doing against the Minnesota Vikings? And a couple things stand out right away. First of all, when you go back through the All-22 tape against the 49ers, you're still seeing some of the issues the Bears have had in terms of like the spacing of routes. So when players are running their routes downfield, too often you have receivers that are either running very close together or ending up in spots close together to where there's not a lot of space in between them. So the same player can kind of cover both players at the same time because you're not stretching the defense in between zones or in man coverage. Like, you're not making them have to cover more areas of the field when the players end up running their routes too close together. Thomas Brown likes to run a lot of formations that are condensed, where the receivers are closer to the tight ends and the offensive tackles. But the idea of doing that is that then you create more space for them to break out and away, and then you create that space after the play. But when they start out together before the snap, then it's hard for the defense to know exactly what area of the field each player is going to go to because they start so condensed. Like, pre-snap, it's an advantage. Post-snap, it's a disadvantage, and you need to be able to spread it out a little bit more and then make the reads more clean for Caleb Williams, because that's the other part of this, right? You have to have options for your quarterback against the Minnesota Vikings blitz. We've seen how much Brian Flores blitzes everybody. We saw how much he blitzed Caleb Williams and company just a couple weeks ago. They're going to send the house again quite a bit. And so you have to give Caleb Williams quick passing options, hot routes that he can throw to quickly. If the blitz comes, just turn and check it down, dump it off quickly just to get the ball out of your hands so you're not taking so many sacks. He has to have options as far as maybe changing the play and audibling into, a wide receiver screen or just something else to set up to let the pass rush come in, let the blitz come in, and then get the ball over quickly behind them and create some space there. And also give him the tools at the line of scrimmage to change the protection and make sure that they've got players there to pick up the blitz when they need to just pick it up and run a real play. When you need to get 12 yards on 3rd and 10 or whatever it is, sometimes you need to be able to pick up the blitz. So to be able to have options there for Caleb Williams is a really important factor here. And I just think when I think back to the 49ers game, we talked about it here on the podcast, just how tentative Caleb Williams felt in that game. He wasn't pulling the trigger on passes that they weren't super open. He wasn't even decisively leaving the pocket. It felt like he was kind of slow to get out of the pocket, slow to decide to scramble, and then they'd catch him before he even has a chance to escape, and that's where he ended up taking more sacks in that game. So you need to give him the green light. Just let him loose and say, hey, Caleb, you know what? It's not, we're 4-9 or 4-9. We don't care if you throw an interception or two. Just play your style of football. Be a playmaker. If you see a receiver and you think you might be able to squeeze it in there, fire it in. We got nothing to lose. So just play fast, play loose, be yourself, and let him go. But also don't put it all on Caleb Williams either. The Bears need to get back to running the ball more effectively. And it's really been a rough stretch the last few games. Because you might remember the first game Thomas Brown took over as offensive coordinator against the Green Bay Packers, DeAndre Swift had a relatively big game. Caleb Williams had some nice scrambles. Roschon Johnson had a couple nice runs. But DeAndre Swift, he ended up rushing for 71 yards on 14 carries, which, in a volume standpoint isn't humongous, but it was over 5 yards per carry for him in that game. It felt like the running game was able to get rolling a bit again there. Caleb had another 70 yards scrambling, and Roschon Johnson added 33. They were able to have a ground game that was effective and kept the offense moving forward and took some of the pressure off of Caleb Williams that way. In the 3 games since then, against the Vikings, Lions, and 49ers, DeAndre Swift has not eclipsed 40 yards in any of those games. His best game was the Lions, where he had 39 yards on 11 carries. So still only 3.5 yards per carry. The other 2 games have been under 3 yards per carry. The worst one was the last Vikings game. 13 carries for 30 yards. Just 2.3 yards per carry from DeAndre Swift in that game. Thomas Brown has to find different ways to get this running game going. Whether it's mixing up your rush concepts a little bit more, although they've done a pretty good job of trying a variety of things. Maybe they have to stick with the same thing and kind of keep running it until it clicks. I mean, I'm not sure that there's this perfect magic wand answer to just say, just do this, and the running game is fixed. But I think you have to keep sticking with it and try and push through that and try and make it so you don't need Caleb Williams to throw the ball 50 times to put up 27 points and climb back in this game. Let the offense help him too, so that you can still let him be the hero and make big plays on his own on other plays, but give him something so it's not just that, right? And I think if he can have plays where he's got his running back making, picking up yards on the ground and you got the ball in the hands of playmakers, then that gives him more confidence to then open it up and fire in some of those more playmaking out of the pocket type of plays, because he knows, hey, if I don't get this on this particular play, my running game is still there for me. The screen game is still there for me. Whatever it is going to be, you have to give him help and then let him loose, and knowing that help is there to catch his fall if he makes the mistake, or buffer anything that might be there, and also give him that safety net to let loose, be free, play loose, and be the best version of Caleb Williams that we're hoping to see each and every week. So I think those are some pretty direct areas where maybe game 1 for Thomas Brown, there was a lot on his plate and he's delegating to a new offensive coordinator and trying to figure out how everything works and just couldn't get everything the way he wanted to. But now that he's been through it for a week, maybe he can come back this week and say, okay, now that I've done this once before, now I see where I was making the mistakes last week and I can fix some of that stuff and get this offense rolling. You're hoping the same thing for defensive coordinator Eric Washington, where this Bears defense is coming off of its worst game of the season against the San Francisco 49ers. A lot to fix there and a lot of similar themes against San Francisco that they can try and then say, okay, we were doing it all wrong in some of the same ways in different aspects of defense, and now we can have a week to sort of reset and say, okay, now here's what we can do differently against the Vikings. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks, the better way to play daily fantasy sports, because Prize Picks puts you in complete control. With Prize Picks, it's not about your lineup competing against 500 other people's lineups. You only win if you finish in the top 10 of that big pool. With Prize Picks, it's you versus the projections available. So you pick more or less on at least 2 players' stats, and you can win up to 100 times your money. So if you want to look at, say, this upcoming game on Monday night, you can pick Justin Jefferson to have, touchdowns. You can pick Caleb Williams passing yards at 214.5 passing yards. It's a lot less than he had last time against the Minnesota Vikings. Or DJ Moore's receiving yards at 56.5. You make your picks right on PrizePicks, and you can win big money. Download the PrizePicks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Whether your lineup is correct or not, doesn't matter. You're getting $50 instantly with that first lineup when you download the PrizePicks app and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL. PrizePicks. Run your game. Locked On Bears is also brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. It's guaranteed perfection in every single bite, and right now you can save on unforgettable gifts with 50% off site-wide. That's 50, half off at omahasteaks.com. Plus, on top of that, you can score an extra $30 off with our promo code NFL. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steaks. And the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages featuring gourmet favorites. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide for a limited time at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with that promo code NFL. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com. Promo code NFL. Minimum purchase may apply. We've known that this Bears offense has had some shortcomings, and that's been a longer work in progress. The defensive collapse against the 49ers was the newer, bigger, fresher concern of like, oh crap, you thought you could kind of rely on that side of the ball, but they dropped the ball against San Francisco in the first game of defensive coordinator Eric Washington calling the plays. And I think it was pretty clear and obvious what was going wrong for them in a way that shouldn't be that hard to correct. And yet, as we've learned watching this Bears team, it often is, right? But I think, you look back at that game against the 49ers, and even the announcers calling the game were pointing out how soft and vanilla the Bears were sitting back in coverage, just dropping back into their standard cover 3 zone and trying to run some pattern match stuff, but really not switching it up all that much. And, after the fact, we have a chance to kind of go back through the film and confirm some of that and also get some of the numbers that really just highlight how drastic it was against the 49ers and how uncreative maybe is the way to describe this from Eric Washington as the play caller. Like if you look at the coverage rates against the 49ers, the Bears were in some form of cover 3 on 73% of their defensive plays. Almost 3/4 of the time, they were running some form of the same coverage. Now, there's different ways you can do cover 3, but of course, you're always going to have 3 deep players and, usually 3 or 4 underneath players. You might run a blitz out of it. Like those would still count in this case, but like 3 deep players in zone and everyone in zone is sort of the general rule to call it cover 3 in this case. And against the 49ers, it was 3/4 of the time. Brock Purdy's dropping back. Most of the time you could guess cover 3. Yep, again, cover 3. Okay, again, I'm just going to throw. I know what the coverage is. Like, it's not that hard to guess and predict there. Now, the Bears are always going to be a primary cover 3 team, but like you want to compare that to the Vikings game the first time around, they ran cover 3 about 50% of the time. So, I mean, if we want to just round the numbers here, you went from 50% of the time to 75% of the time from the Vikings game to the 49ers game. I think the more concerning thing even beyond that in the 49ers game is not just that it's all cover 3, but when they did mix it up, it was almost always single deep safety. It was about 11% of the time it was cover 1 on top of the 73% of cover 3. So that gets you to almost 85% of the time you had 1 deep safety. And then 15% of the time they ran cover 4. And there was only 3 coverages they ran all game. Cover 3, cover 4, cover 1. No cover 2, no cover 6, no, 2 deep man coverage. It was very plain and predictable from a play calling standpoint. And that's the main thing that changed there. In previous weeks, okay, you're about half cover 3, but then the other half of your snaps, you're mixing in cover 4 and cover 2 and cover 1. The Bears really don't run much cover 6 as a defense, which I'd like to see, again, because like all these are coverages where it's the same on both sides of the field, and when you have a split field coverage where one side is different than the other, it's harder for the quarterback to read. But like all this is to say, Eric Washington, like, just be less vanilla in your coverage calls. Like, that your guys, this is a veteran defense full of experienced players. Yeah, you've had a third string safety in there, and maybe that's why they want to run more single deep coverage, because maybe you just didn't trust Jonathan Owens to be a deep safety back there as much as you do Kevin Byard. But like, still, you got to be able to trust these veteran players that, hey, we can run more of a variety of coverage. And then, yeah, maybe they're still going to find ways to move the ball on any of your coverages just because you're going up against this week Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison or whatever. Like, good players get open regardless of coverage. But at least you're not making it so easy and predictable for the quarterback the way it was for Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan. Like, when you go up against offensive minds like Shanahan and now Kevin O'Connell, like, they're going to find weaknesses wherever they can, and there's no point in making it easy on them. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to make it that easy on them, they just ran the same kind of backside dig routes and crossing routes and over routes and drags all day against the 49ers did last week. They just kept throwing the same routes over and over again, right behind the linebackers, right in front of the linebackers. It's the same read for Brock Purdy every time. That's how he's able to slice and dice you for 38 points. Like, it's that basic, and the Bears need to get back to mixing it up more. I mean, they had some success taking away Justin Jefferson the first time against the Vikings, but they got so blown out by Hawkinson and Addison that it almost didn't matter. Like, pick your poison at that point there. But at least they threw some different coverages at them and had Jalen Johnson shadow Justin Jefferson a lot of times, but sometimes they'd pass him off and just made it a messier picture for Sam Darnold. And I think that's the other side of this, is like, not only was it vanilla pass rush not only was it vanilla coverage on the back end against the 49ers, but it was vanilla pass rush as well. A lot of simple four-man rushes, maybe a stunt a time or two, but you weren't seeing those kind of plays where Matt Eberflus would walk the linebackers up to the line of scrimmage or walk Kyler Gordon up to the line of scrimmage, and you're not really sure, are these guys going to blitz or are they going to drop back into coverage? And they still drop back into coverage the majority of the time, but at least when you show it a lot, the quarterback has to adjust the protection, the offensive line has to communicate and get everything set so that it's not easy, predictable. What you read pre-snap is what you get post-snap. You want to change the way it looks for the quarterback, and that to me felt like a really big issue against San Francisco that will be the same issue against the 49ers if Eric Washington doesn't improve it. And then you got to throw in the run defense there. Continues to be a pretty big problem. The last handful of weeks, we saw Aaron Jones have a pretty big game against the Bears just 3 weeks ago, and Isaac Guerrero did it for the 49ers. Another one of these, like, there's no magic wand to make the defensive line and linebackers play the run better, but I don't know, could you put more guys in the box and maybe a little less of the six-man box? If you're going to play so much single deep safety anyway, can you just creep that safety in closer to the line of scrimmage, closer to the middle of the field, and just try and load it up a little bit more without being too predictable in coverage? Like, you got to stay multiple. You got to show them different things, and maybe you can go that put the safety in the box and then roll them back into a two deep coverage. Like, there's ways to get creative to do this, and it's a lot more of an art than a science, but you just want to see them trying different things. And last week against San Francisco, just didn't feel like there was a lot of trying different things. It was a lot of just running the same things over and over again and expecting some sort of different results. We all know that what that is a cliche, the definition of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? Like, maybe we've had enough insanity in Chicago for one season here, but there are going to be some changes for the Bears on special teams. Whether Richard Hightower wanted to or not, they're going to have to make some changes. There is one change out of their control, another change needs to be well within their control. We'll kind of look at how the injury report is going to play into this matchup on Monday night. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And FanDuel wants to help you out with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So that $5 bet can be on anything. I mean, NBA, NHL, college football, tennis, soccer, combat sports, or you could bet on Bears Vikings. Right now at FanDuel, the line is Bears +7, 7-point underdogs on the road. The money line is Bears +260 if you want to bet the upset straight up. And the over-under is set at 44.5 points. You place a $5 bet on any of those, or even if you want to get in on some live betting in the NFL, the app gives you everything you need to place your live bets all in one place. So if you get that hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. The offense and defense is where the changes are really needed because things went so poorly last week in game one of Thomas Brown and Eric Washington. On special teams, changes are going to be forced because of the injury report, the latest roster moves the Bears have made, and also just sort of some recent history there. So, like, first and foremost, it feels like it shouldn't need to be said at this point, but like Richard Hightower has to absolutely make sure that there is not a blocked field goal in this game. The Bears did not attempt a field goal against the San Francisco 49ers last week, so we didn't really have a chance to see how well their field goal unit blocking has been since Packers and Vikings blocked field goals in back-to-back games. We didn't see a field goal against the Detroit Lions either. They've generally gone away from that. The Lions kicked some field goals in that game, but the Bears did not. They may have to kick a field goal against the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings blocked one 3 weeks ago. Richard Hightower better be damn sure that a field goal is not going to be blocked, at least not blocked up the middle in the same spot for the third time. Like, you have to make sure that you have made whatever changes are necessary. And I'm not an expert enough on special teams to be able to tell you, oh, actually, yeah, you just got to have this guy do this slightly more. I mean, you're trying to block people. Field goal blocking is above my pay grade, we'll say. But, like, Jesus, you cannot let that ever happen again the rest of the season. If the Vikings block another field goal, you should probably fire Richard Hightower. Like, just with 3 games left, like, what are we doing at that point? Like, that's sort of the obvious change that you better make sure is set. There weren't any extra points blocked, so in theory, maybe things are better there. But when you get farther back and then the field goal is flatter, that's where the block comes in, and that's where I'm nervous if they have to attempt a field goal against the Vikings. But the more forced change here is that your primary punt and kick returner this season, DeAndre Carter, just went on injured reserve. And given that there's only 4 weeks left in the season, I believe that means he is done for the season. So you will have a new kickoff and punt returner this week against the Vikings. And we saw against the 49ers that Josh Blackwell was the first man up on punt returns. We didn't see any other kick returns last week when Carter got hurt. It was just Blackwell on the punt return. And so in theory, you'd say, okay, yeah, just plug Josh Blackwell in. He'll be your new return guy. Well, then we get the injury report for Thursday. And it was just a walkthrough, so it's kind of an estimated injury report. But Josh Blackwell, DNP, shoulder. So Josh Blackwell is injured. Your top option to return in place of DeAndre Carter there is missing practice. Now, maybe he'll be good to go by Monday and play. It's just 1 day of practice, and it's a walkthrough. Should mention that DeAndre Swift also didn't practice. Roschon Johnson didn't practice. Jervon Dexter didn't practice. Ryan Bates didn't practice. And Josh Blackwell all did not practice. Now, some of those guys missed practice last week, but DeAndre Swift still played. Jervon Dexter still played. Blackwell still played. So, in theory, those guys may be able to still go here. Like, whereas Roschon Johnson and Ryan Bates, a little less likely to play because they've been missing time with their concussions since then anyway. But if Blackwell can't go, then you're on your third string return man here. And then what are your options? Well, there's some good news on the injury report that third string running back Travis Homer was a full participant at the walkthrough practice on Thursday, so he'll be good to go. And I would imagine he might be next man up, at least in the kickoff return game. Travis Homer was a kickoff return man for the Seattle Seahawks early in his career. In 2019, 2020, 2021, he had a kickoff return touchdown. I think it might have been on an onside kick, if I remember right, in 2021. But he has kickoff return experience. And with Velus Jones gone and Khalil Herbert gone, like, those probably would have been your first choices there, perhaps, or your next choices there after DeAndre Carter. But you could see Travis Homer getting in that action there. I mean, Blackwell returned to kickoff earlier this year when DeAndre Carter missed time, so I think ideally, Blackwell is healthy and handles both punts and kickoff returns. At least from the Bears' perspective, that's what they would ideally want to do. I'm not sure if I wouldn't rather have, more of an offensive player who's more of a ball carrier in there as opposed to a DB. But, got to give Blackwell a shot as the return man. If he's been practicing that all year, then he might be the best man for the job. But if Blackwell can't go either, maybe it's Travis Homer on punt returns or on kick returns, but he's never done punt returns. So then what? Is it Tyler Scott? I mean, he's done some punt returns, at least in the preseason. I don't remember if he's done any regular season punt returns. I'm filibustering to see right now. He played 5 punt returns last season when they were rotating through different punt returners. So Tyler Scott's probably the next man up, but I'd be interested in Rome Odunze back there just to try it. I mean, I was going to say, what do you have to lose? I mean, you don't want him to get hurt, but like, I think it'd be fun to see one of your playmakers back there, your young rookie wide receiver, just getting a shot at it and see if that top 10 pick talent can bust open a big play on a punt return. Again, it probably would be Travis Homer on kick returns, Tyler Scott on punt returns if Josh Blackwell can't go. But at this point, like, give Odunze a couple of punt returns. What's the worst that's going to happen there? I mean, I know it's easy to say that, but I do think it would be fun to watch. And if he's still kind of your number 3 in the offense anyway, it's not like it's going to keep him from seeing the field as much. Like, is he going to be too tired from returning punts to play as much on offense? Well, they're coming out with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen as kind of your top 2 receivers a lot of the time anyway. So you could give him the first play or 2 off, and I think he'd be fine. He's a young guy. He can handle adding some punt return duties in there. He's done some return stuff in the past. We saw him do a little bit in training camp in the preseason. Like, he's worked some reps there. So why not, right? It's the Vikings. You're 4-9. Like, just go for it. Throw some. Like, that's what I want to see from the Bears as a whole here. Like, you got nothing to lose. So Caleb Williams got to let it rip. Like, lean on DeAndre Swift and let the running game really kind of pound it through. Defense, get funky, get creative. Try some different blitzes, try some different fronts, try some different coverages. And if it doesn't work, oh no, you lost. Oh, you've already lost 7 in a row. Who cares if you lose 8 in a row? Like, the season's a little bit lost in that regard anyway. So throw some stuff at the wall, try some new stuff, get creative, and go for the high variance there. Because you never know if it works just the right way. Like, that's how you can start to pull off a big upset and start to, not that you're going to climb back into the playoff hunt or anything, but at least send a message of like, hey, this is still a talented football team, and that the head coach in particular, was holding them back, and that they can still beat a playoff team like the Minnesota Vikings. Like, they maybe just can belong a little bit closer into that conversation than what we've seen so far from them the last handful of weeks. I do think even though the team is, out of it, there's still a lot for this team to play for the rest of the year, even if the playoffs aren't really within reach. And I want to take some time to go through some of the specific things that they have to play for and that we have to tune in for over the final 4 weeks of the season. That's going to be coming up on Monday's podcast. Since the Bears play Monday night, we still have another podcast to come out before the game on Monday. I want to talk through what the Bears still have to play through the season on Monday's podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. That way you come back on Monday and you don't miss a single one of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Don't forget to check out Locked On NFL for some more football coverage, or Locked On podcast for all of your favorite sports teams. Baseball, MLB, NBA, NHL, and college sports. We've got Locked On podcasts for every team. We don't have all the colleges, but every major professional sports team has a Locked On podcast, plus all the big colleges at least. We've got you covered here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So go check out another Locked On podcast for your second listen today. Coming back on Monday, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.